I'm a Senior Solutions Architect here in our public sector practice. And I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to welcome you to the second in a series of webinars that we have put together for our education customers. In this webinar, we'll focus on how to get started on Amazon Web Services. Before we get going, I wanted to remind folks that all of your phone lines are muted. I encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and you can do this by submitting a question using GoToWebinar's Ask Question feature. We have time allocated at the end of the webinar to try and answer as many questions as possible. Also, next week we have our third webinar in the education series, where one of my colleagues will address ease of AWS deployment. So here's a quick look at the topics we'll cover today. First, I want to provide a quick overview of AWS. While some of you may have attended last week's webinar, I know that we may have additional folks that are new joining us for the first time. So I thought it would be good to take a few minutes and provide a brief overview. Following the overview, I'll describe the process for signing up for an AWS account. And in the interest of time, I will not do a demo for the account sign-up process. Rather, I'll show you a few screenshots I prepared so that I can walk you through what the process looks like. After that, I'll give a demo of AWS Web-based Console. Web-based Console provides users an easy point-and-click interface to start using AWS services. Later, I'll provide an overview of EC2, or Elastic Compute Cloud Service, as well as S3, which is our simple storage service. I'll also do a demo of both services so I can show you what those services look like. And I'll make sure that I have time left at the end of the presentation to address as many questions as possible. So without further ado, let's get going. AWS is a comprehensive cloud services platform that offers core services such as compute, storage, and databases, as well as a number of other application services such as content delivery, data analytics, queuing, notifications, and other functionality that organizations can use to deploy applications and services in a cost-effective manner. We also provide a number of services that can be used by customers to manage and administer deployments that they may be hosting on AWS. All of these services are provided with a on-demand, pay-as-you-go model. So let's look at our global infrastructure. AWS has data centers in multiple geographic locations around the world. A cluster of these data centers in a particular part of the world is what we call an Amazon AWS region. We have 10 such regions in the world, 4 in US, and 6 regions outside of US. And in terms of the regions that are in US, we have 1 on the East Coast and 3 on the West Coast. One of the regions on the West Coast is called GovCloud, a region that is capable of supporting ITAR compliant workloads. So if you have use cases and data that is restricted for export compliancy regulations, GovCloud would be ideal region for that. And across these 10 regions, we have a total of 26 availability zones, and I'll describe what an availability zone is on the next slide. In addition to our regions and availability zones, we also have 51 different edge locations around the world, and these edge locations can be used by customers to deliver content to their end users with very low latency. For example, content such as static content, multimedia files, or even dynamic websites for that matter. You can serve through leveraging our edge locations. And the key point I want to make here is you as a customer, you decide where your applications and data go. So for example, if you deploy into our US East region, that's where your applications and data will live. And you are the only one that can move that data out of that region into a different region. So taking a look at availability zones, each region is divided into multiple logical sections. We call these availability zones. And this is a representation, as you can see, of our US East 1 region. Each region has at least 2 availability zones. Most regions have more than 2 availability zones. An availability zone is a collection of 1 or more data centers fault isolated from other availability zones in the same region. So what I mean by fault isolation is that they're served by different part of the power grid, different tier 1 internet service providers, different backup heating and cooling systems, different fault lines and floodplains where it really matters. AZs, or availability zones, within a region are interconnected with redundant and private high-speed connectivity, allowing customers to deploy applications across AZs, but still achieve very high availability. And because AZs are interconnected using private lines, we can offer a single-digit millisecond latency between AZs. So it's almost as if those data centers are sitting right next to each other. When it comes to certifications and accreditations, first thing I want to point out is security is our #1 priority here at AWS. We know that it's important for you to understand how and what kind of protection measures are in use to guard our AWS cloud infrastructure. But since you can't physically touch our servers or walk through our data centers, how can you be sure that the right security controls are in place? Well, the answer lies in the third-party certifications and evaluations that we have undergone. So as you can see on the slide, we have achieved a number of certifications. And I'll start with SOC 1, 2, and 3. And these are also previously referred to as SAS 70 certifications. For government customers, we have FISMA, ITAR, FIPS, and FedRAMP. For customers that are in the finance and payment industry, we have achieved PCI DSS level 1. For healthcare and PHI-related data sets, we are able to support HIPAA workloads on AWS, and we're also ready to sign BAAs. For international customers, we have achieved ISO 27001 certification. For customers in the digital media and entertainment space who are concerned with digital rights of content, we have achieved Motion Picture Association of America certification. And last but not least, most recently, we have achieved DoD, Department of Defense, provisional authority to operate for levels 1 and 2, and we're working our way up the stack to levels 3 and 5. And when it comes to the benefits of AWS Cloud and why customers are moving to AWS, customers are able to replace CapEx dollars with OpEx spending. So projects can get started really soon. That may not be otherwise possible. Since AWS is operating and supporting a large number of customers, we're able to achieve scales of economy, which we are then able to pass on to our customers as cost savings. And this, in turn, results in lower operational expenses over time. And when customers need capacity, they just provision it on AWS. And this eliminates the guesswork that you typically are involved with in terms of provisioning on-premise environments. Customers are able to launch servers in minutes, not weeks or months, which are typical with an on-premise deployment. And since AWS takes care of the physical infrastructure-related tasks, customers can focus on their mission and leave the undifferentiated heavy lifting to AWS. Customers can also reach global audience easily by leveraging our global regions. And as I mentioned earlier, we have 10 different regions that you can leverage in order to reach your global audience. So let's look at what differentiates AWS from other vendors in the space. I'll start with experience. We are supporting customers for over 8 years now, and we have supported virtually every customer and every imaginable case that you can think of. We're supporting hundreds of thousands of customers across 190 countries, 3,000 educational institutions around the world. In terms of innovation, we're rapidly adding new features and services based on feedback that we receive from customers. So these features are immediately available as they're added into the platform to existing customers as well. And nobody in the industry has close to the number of services and features within those services that AWS has. We have very robust, fully featured infrastructure technology platform that we offer to customers. In terms of pricing, AWS has a very simple and consistent pricing philosophy. We work relentlessly to take cost out of our own cost structure so that we can lower prices to our customers. And I mentioned about our global footprint in which you can leverage and quickly go global as you need to. Last thing I want to point out is our ecosystem. This is where our partners, whether they're independent software vendors or systems integrators and consulting technology partners, we have a large contingent of them available and ready to help. We also have 1,400 applications in our marketplace where customers can go in and with one click launch an application and get going with an application as opposed to racking and stacking servers. A very quick and easy way to get going. So let's take a look at what it takes to sign up for an AWS account. There is a website, the URL is listed here, aws.amazon.com/getting-started, that I would highly recommend that you take a look at. There are a number of videos and tutorials, step-by-step tutorials that will walk you through the process. In fact, there is a video that talks through and walks and shows through how you can sign up for an AWS account and what steps are involved. So definitely recommend taking a look at that. And I also want to point out that since AWS operates on a utility-based pricing, you will not be charged unless you start using our services. So signing up for an account is not going to cost you anything. And when you're ready to sign up for an account, you can go to aws.amazon.com and click on a button called Sign Up. It's on the far right top. And as I get into the console a little later, I'll point it out. To sign up for an account, you need a valid email address. If you're an existing Amazon.com retail customer, you could continue to use that as you sign up for an AWS account. Or a recommended way is to create a new email address account and use that for your AWS account. That way you can keep your retail account and your AWS account separate from each other. Once you're ready to sign up, you are required to provide some contact information, including name, phone, and email and address. Oops, why do I keep doing that? Okay. On a subsequent page, you are also required to provide payment instrument, which is by default a credit card. And I know that in education institutions, typically you would rather prefer to use either an invoice or a P-card payment method. And we do support all of those methods, so I would recommend you to contact AWS Sales, one of our representatives, and we'll send you a link that will let you skip the credit card information screen. After you provide the billing information, a phone-based verification is conducted to ensure that the request is coming from a valid source. This is to ensure and minimize any fraud that may be involved. And on the last stage of the sign-up process, you have an option to select a support plan. And if you're just getting started and you want to play around with services, I would recommend selecting the basic support plan. It's free of charge, and you have access to online forums, and you can post questions and look at the knowledge base. I also want to point out that there's a free tier that's available. To help customers get started, we offer a free usage tier. And you can run a number of applications and leverage our services in this free tier without actually paying anything. And the free tier is valid for 12 months from the time of your sign up. So I highly encourage you to take advantage of that. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to walk you through some sample screenshots of what the account sign up process looks like. On the left-hand side here is the main entry screen where you are providing your email address, or you'd select I am a new user option. Click on the continue or sign in button. It'll take you to the next screen, which is where you're configuring your login credentials, your email address, and you're also selecting your password. After that, you get to the screen that asks you for your contact information, followed by a security check, once again to prevent any automated script-based account creation procedures. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a link for our customer usage agreement. I'd recommend that you take a look at that and read through the terms of usage, check the box, and continue to create your account. The following screenshot is the default payment information screenshot. It refers to credit card as the payment method. But as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in using an invoice-based payment, reach out to us and we'll send you a link that'll let you skip the screen. The next set of screenshots are the phone verification screenshots, where an automated system is going to make a call to a number that you select, and once the call is placed, it'll show a PIN number on your screen. The idea and goal is that you're required to enter that PIN, and if it matches with what the system has in its database, it will confirm your account, and verification will be completed, and your account will be created. All right, so at this time, I want to step out of the PowerPoint mode, and I'm going to go into a browser and show you a quick demo of our console. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see my screenshot here, actually the browser. So this is the homepage of aws.amazon.com. This is the homepage for AWS services. On the top right, or actually the top portion of the screen, in the middle of the screen with the yellow button, that's the button that you would go for establishing an account. I am going into the Management Console by selecting AWS Management Console. I'm using my existing account, followed by logging in. So as you'll notice, it is now prompting me to enter a authentication code or a one-time password. This is an optional feature that I would highly recommend that you enable on your accounts as well. This is called a multi-factor authentication, where it's asking for a one-time password, and that password could be either virtual MFA, such as a Google Authenticator or even Amazon's own authenticator application, or you can get a physical token like a Gemalto or an RSA token. So this lets you add additional security on top of your login process. Once I successfully authenticate, I am now looking at the console homepage. As you can see, there's a lot of services that are listed here, and to help, they're also categorized into various buckets. So for example, compute and networking, all of the services that are relevant for compute and networking are grouped together. Similarly, storage and content delivery, databases, and so on. Towards the right side of the screen, where it says Service Health, you'll see a link that shows Service Health Dashboard. If I were to click on that, a new window will open, and it shows you the service health of all of our services across the world at this given time. So this is a real-time dashboard showing you how our services are performing across the board in all of our regions. So this is a quick and easy way to make sure that services are healthy. If you have any questions or concerns, definitely reach out to support. So let's get back to the console. The other thing I want to point out is right below that, where it says Set Start Page. So when I logged into the console, it took me by default into what's called a console homepage. If, let's say I'm a user that goes typically into one of these services, such as EC2, what I can do is select EC2 as my default start page, and therefore the next time I log into console, it's going to skip the console homepage and take me directly into the EC2 homepage. So that way I can eliminate one extra click. But once again, this is optional. And on the far right, where it currently shows my name, a number of other links are available, whether it's changing passwords, billing and cost management, and also to sign out. And right next to that is our listing of global regions. You'll see all of our regions except two, GovCloud and our Beijing region, and those two are supported through their own isolated consoles. So I'll actually get into more details and actually dig into EC2 and S3 specific consoles as we get further down into the demo portion of those services. So for now, I am going to quickly sign out and go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So the next topic I want to cover is EC2. So EC2 is our Elastic Compute Cloud. The way to think about it is it's virtual servers in the cloud. So whether you want to launch a Windows or a Linux server, this is a service that you'd use to launch servers in the cloud. We have 34 different types of instances that we support. And an instance type, to define what an instance type is, it's a combination of CPU, memory, disk, and I/O or network throughput capacity. That combination makes up an instance type. We have 34 different instance types to choose from, and depending on your use case or workload or your application, you can decide whichever one is ideal for that application. And once you choose an instance type, if you want to move up or down, you can certainly do so. And in terms of launching a server, it literally takes a few minutes. In case of Linux, it could be anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes. In case of Windows, it could be anywhere in the range of 5 minutes-ish. From the time you start an instance till the time you actually have access into the instance. You also have the ability to scale your computing needs as your application grows or demand increases. You can increase your EC2 footprint. And the key thing is you're only paying for the capacity that you're actually using. So you don't have to over-provision or suffer insufficient capacity. You actually can grow and increase your fleet of EC2 instances as your demand of your application increases. You also have the ability to go across and deploy in multiple availability zones within a region, or if you're interested in a multi-region deployment, you can actually deploy in multiple regions of AWS as well. We also support virtual network interfaces, especially if you're deployed into our virtual private cloud, which is a logical network segmentation of our public cloud. You can define your own subnets, you can define access control lists, route tables, etc. Typical networking concepts that you're used to in on-premise deployments. You could bring all of those concepts into our virtual private cloud and launch your environments and instances into that environment. So just to show you the various instance families that we support, we have a family called General Purpose, where it's well balanced between CPU, memory, and disk I/O. Generally ideal for web servers, app servers, workloads that are well balanced. If you have a need for high compute-oriented instances, we have a compute-optimized instance family. For micro instances are primarily for testing and playing. They're not necessarily powerful enough for production workloads. If you have graphics-oriented instances, you could go with GPU instances. If you have a lot of storage requirements, you could go with one of our storage-optimized instances, as well as we also have a number of memory-optimized instances if your applications require a lot of memory. In addition to the ones that I listed here, if you were to access that link that's on the slide, we have an additional set of instances that we also offer through the EC2 service. One of the building blocks of EC2 service is called Amazon Machine Image, or AMI. An AMI is an image of a running EC2 instance, so that you can then take that AMI and launch many more EC2 instances from it. You also have the ability to copy an AMI from one region to a different region. So for example, let's say you build your application in our Northern Virginia US East region, and for some reason you have to deploy in our Sydney region. You capture an AMI in US East, copy that over to our Sydney region, and then bring up EC2 instances in our Sydney region. So it literally takes the same amount of time for you to, whatever time it takes for you to copy the AMI from one region to the other region is really how long it takes for you to move the entire application from one region of one part of the world to a different part of the world. You can also share these AMIs either in a public mode with others across the institution, or you can even share in a private mode where you may be sharing an AMI with one of your colleagues that may be collaborating with you. Elastic Block Store, or EBS, these are volumes, or these are drives, external drives that are attached to EC2 instances. So I mentioned earlier that each EC2 instance comes with local storage. That is considered temporary storage. So if you stop or terminate an EC2 instance, that storage goes away. And this is where you would want EBS. If you want persistence, you want to attach EBS volumes. EBS volumes can go from 1 gigabyte to 1 terabyte in size. And if you need more than 1 terabyte, you can RAID 0 a number of EBS volumes and get to however much of capacity you need. You can snapshot these EBS volumes, and those snapshots go to our simple storage service. So you have a mechanism to back up incrementally any data that you're placing on EBS volumes. And then you can also attach EBS volumes to one instance, copy the data, do whatever you want to do, and then detach and reattach those volumes to a different instance. So it allows you to move between EC2 instances as well. And then last, we also, in addition to the standard I/O capacity, we offer provisioned I/O capacity, where if you have high I/O requirements, for example, a database that's running on an EC2 server, you may want to consider provisioned IOPS, where you predefine your I/O requirements up to 4,000 I/O per second, and we can offer that, and we can consistently provide that throughput. Autoscaling is a feature of EC2 that lets you define business rules, and based on those business rules, we can actually adjust your EC2 instance fleet sizing. You can go from one server to thousands of servers based on rules that you define. You can really scale up really fast, and all of these fast scaling activities happen based on real-time load. So any applications where you have dynamic work performance or dynamic load on your applications, definitely take advantage of autoscaling. You can also use autoscaling to set minimum and maximum scaling policies, as well as set min 1, max 1 to ensure you have always at least one healthy EC2 instance running, and if that instance were to go into an unhealthy state for whatever reason, autoscaling will replace it with a healthy instance. Elastic load balancing is a feature that we offer as part of EC2. It's load balancing for your EC2 instances. So if you have more than one EC2 instance, you'd want to go through an ELB, or elastic load balancer, so that ELB can then balance load across the EC2 fleet that's running behind it. You could use HTTP for port 80 or 443 for HTTPS traffic, as well as a number of other TCP ports that you'd want to send directly to EC2 instances. In addition to load balancing, it also has the ability to do health checks. So if one of the EC2 instances were to suffer an issue, it can stop sending traffic to it until a point where it becomes healthy. ELB also works with autoscaling to seamlessly add and remove EC2 instances from your pool as your scaling activities kick in. So at this point, I want to quickly jump once again back out of PowerPoint and go to the browser to do a quick demo of EC2 instances or EC2 service. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen here. I'm logging back into the console. Going through my MFA. And this time I'm going to drill into EC2. Once I select that, you'll see that the console has changed. And you'll also notice that the drop down here, where previously it said global, is now enabled, and you can see all of the various regions of AWS. So as it says here, I'm currently operating out of Oregon region. So let's say I'm going to stick there. I want to go to running instances to see it's showing that there are 2 instances that are already running. And So actually, let me skip that step, and I'm going to launch an instance. So to launch a new EC2 instance, I clicked on a launch instance button. It puts me into a EC2 launch wizard, walks me through step by step. So this is where I'm selecting from one of the public AMIs that are available. As you can see, there are a number of operating systems and combinations that are available. Either it's various flavors of Linux, or as I scroll down, there are a number of flavors of Windows as well. So let's say I am going to launch a Windows R2, 2008 R2. On the next screen, I am selecting an instance type. So in this case, I'm going to select M3 extra large with 13 ECUs with 4 virtual CPUs and 15 gigs of memory. And this is where you can select an instance type that is appropriate for your application. On the next screen, I am selecting how many instances I want to launch, and in this case I'm going to leave it at 1, but if I want to launch 10 different EC2 instances with identical configuration, I can do this, and all of those instances will launch in parallel. As I mentioned earlier, there's the concept of virtual private cloud. You can create a virtual private cloud and launch these EC2 instances into one of those subnets. In addition to that, I can also launch these servers or instances into EC2 Classic, which is a flat network, and I'm going to leave for the demo, I'm going to leave it in Classic. I have the option to select various availability zones that are available in Oregon region, or I can leave it as no preference and let the system auto-select. I would point out that for production launches, make sure that you turn on protect against accidental termination. This will ensure that you won't accidentally terminate an instance, rather to force you to make an intentional change to the configuration before you can delete and terminate it. So let's go ahead and continue. By default, along with the instance type, certain amount of storage will come with it. If I want additional storage, additional EBS volumes, this is where I would go in and add. I'm going to continue and move forward with the storage that's pre-provisioned. Tagging is a feature where you are indicating as to some metadata about the instance itself. So in this case, I'm going to tag it as demo EC2. Initially, it may be okay if you have few servers in your console, but as you ramp up and you launch more and more servers, it becomes critical for you to differentiate between various instances. So tagging is a mechanism that helps in that regard. Security group is a virtual firewall that we offer at the hypervisor layer, where based on your rules that you define here, traffic will only pass through if you're permitting that port and permitting that IP address to reach inbound. This is in addition to whatever firewalls that are provided by the operating system itself. So in case of Windows, there is a Microsoft Windows firewall that comes with it. In case of Linux, you can use IP tables or other mechanisms to control traffic at the instance level or the operating system level. Security group is a virtual firewall that sits around the EC2 instance itself. So traffic will not even reach the instance unless you have configured your security group to allow that. So in this case, it detected that it's the Windows instance, so it auto-selected RDP and the port, and it's saying that it's going to open it up from anywhere. And here I can drop down and say only allow traffic on port 3389 from my IP or a specific range of IPs. So for demo, I'm going to leave it open. So at this time, I'm ready to launch. I'm going to go ahead and click on launch. It's warning me, it's a soft warning telling me that I have a security group that's a little wide open, telling me that I may want to consider tightening it down. As well as the instance that I'm about to launch is not eligible for free tier. So just if you're thinking about using free tier, this is one more caution to take note of. So once I click launch, the last step it's going to ask me is selecting a key pair. So a key pair is a mechanism that you use to define cryptographic keys where public portion of the key is maintained on the AWS side. And when you define a key, you are immediately provided access to the private portion, and AWS does not retain the private portion. It's very important to safeguard that private portion of the key, because that's how you will be able to log into the EC2 instances later on. So for the demo, I'm going to select one of the key pairs that I already have in the system. I acknowledge that I have access to the private key, and go ahead and continue with launch. Launch will take about a few minutes. As I said earlier, depending on the Windows instance or Linux instance, it may take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. I can click on View Instances to go back to the interface and see that the new instance is running. And while that is running, and it may take a few minutes for that to come up and be ready, I have 2 other instances that are already in a running state. That one of them is a Windows 2012 instance, the other one is a Linux instance. So if I were to click on anywhere on the grid, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a lot of information about the instance, its various properties. But one of the properties that is important is the public DNS. This is how you access that server. So what I'm going to do next is I want to RDP, remote desktop, use the RDP protocol and RDP client from Microsoft and connect into that Windows 2012 server. To do that, I am launching Microsoft Remote Desktop, and I have predefined this instance in the Remote Desktop client. So all I have to do is double click and continue. So at this time, it's actually connecting to an EC2 server running in our Oregon region, and it's negotiating certificates, and it's about to ask me to enter credentials so I can actually log into the server. Okay, so because I can't remember all of the passwords, I'm going to cheat a bit. Let me see if I can quickly find password file. And here I am. So once I entered the right password and confirmed, I'm now looking and sitting in front of a server that's actually in Oregon, in our AWS region in Oregon. It's a Windows 2012 server. Once the server is available, it is no different. Once you're actually logged into the server, it's no different than any other Windows server that you're running in your own data center. You have full administrative rights to the server. You can install any application. You can change settings on the server as you need to. One thing to point out is AWS does not have access into your guest operating systems. So you have full rights as well as responsibility for the guest operating system itself. And let's say I want to log into a Linux server, the other one that I have running as well. Quickly to show that, bring up a terminal server. I have a few commands that I've pre-prepared, so I can speed this up. I'm using SSH to connect to the server, and you'll notice that I'm also providing it the private portion of my key, and this is how it knows that to securely authenticate itself into the server. And there you go. I am actually at the command prompt of the EC2 server, Amazon Linux, that's once again running in our Oregon region. In terms of connecting to servers running in other regions, it's no different. It's exactly the same process. So let's quickly go back to the servers and see how we're doing with the server that we launched. So as you can see, the last one, which is the demo EC2 that I launched a few minutes ago, it's still going through, it's in a running state, and before it becomes completely available, it goes through some health checks to make sure everything came up correctly and everything is healthy. So it's going to take about a minute or so for that to complete. So what I'll do is I'll leave this alone. I'll go back to PowerPoint, and I want to continue on with S3 and make sure that S3 is done. Okay. So simple storage service is our object storage for mainly intended for storing vast amount of data. So you start with storing data by creating a bucket. We call it a bucket because you can pretty much put anything in it. Anything that's of 1 byte or larger up to 5 terabytes per object. And you can put as many objects as you want to in a bucket. There is virtually no limit. In terms of durability, we offer 11 lines of durability. What that translates to is if you place 1 billion objects into a bucket, the chances of you losing an object, you may lose 1 out of 1 billion objects. And even that is far remote. We're currently holding trillions of objects on behalf of our customers. And because S3 is also directly internet facing, if you want to, you can actually serve content directly from S3 to the end users. And we regularly peak at 1.5 million requests per second. So S3 is, in one way, it's probably one of the largest web servers there is. Let me jump back to and go back into S3. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the Service Console home. Let's look at S3. Once I click on S3, it lists all of the buckets that are already available or I have previously created, no matter which region I have created these in. And I'm going to start by creating a new bucket. As I click that, it asks me for a bucket name. So let's say I'm going to do that. Give it a name. I also have to select a region. In this case, I'm going to leave it as Oregon. And create. And there you go, a bucket is created. So once the bucket is created, you can create folders within a bucket, or you can actually directly upload objects into the bucket. It's completely up to you. There is no real need to create folders. But most users are used to logical organization of folders and documents in a folder hierarchical layout. So folder is just a technique that you could use if you want to. Well, let's say I want to upload an object into this bucket. I could do this through the console by simply clicking and selecting the local file from my desktop that I want to use. And let's say I'm going to select a file that I have. And go ahead and click Start Upload. It probably takes a few seconds. There you go, it's done. Once the object is uploaded, if I click on Properties, you'll see that there is a URL, a unique URL already pre-assigned to that object. By default, the object is not available for anyone. I have to change permissions by allowing either everyone to open and view that object or a specific user by email address if I want to. So that's how you can control. By default, it's only available to the owner of that object. So let's say I want to open it up. And if I take the URL now, go to a different tab, and there you go. The object is actually being served directly out of S3 in Oregon to my browser. Quickly to show you, if I were to go back and remove that permission and save, and if I go back, and security is enforced at the time of access. So because I remove permission to everyone or anonymous users, it's no longer available. It's denying access. So you have full control in terms of how you want to make data available to and share with your colleagues or others in your institution. So with that, I have one last slide that I would like to bring up. So last thing I want to say is we want to hear from you. We would like to know whether this webinar was helpful. If you have any other topics that you're interested in, or if you have use cases that you would like to discuss with us, we're definitely open to working with you on that. We also want to point out that there are a number of resources that are available, whether it's training that we offer, or there are Quick Labs, a partner of ours that offers 6 free introduction to AWS labs that you can go in on your own and launch and play with EC2 instances, or S3, or create a VPC and go through and define subnets and things like that. So definitely worth the time, and highly encourage you to consider doing that. Last but not least, we have next week, as I mentioned earlier, we have a webinar coming up. One of my colleagues is going to go through and cover ease of AWS deployment. It's mostly going to be hands-on. He's going to be walking through and showing you various typical workloads and how those workloads can be deployed on AWS in a very quick and easy manner. With that, I'm going to be handing over to Michael and Gerard, who are colleagues here, helping me with Q&A.
Okay, so this is Michael Landis here with AWS. I'm an account representative here on this side, along with Gerard, who will be fielding some of those questions. Before we jump into the Q&A, we just have a few polling questions we'll have you address really quickly. Of course, thank you. I've already seen a whole bunch of questions submitted, and we are quickly getting some answers to those. And we'll also be sharing a lot of those answers and the questions themselves with everyone else. So we'll go ahead and start with a couple of quick questions here. Okay, thank you everyone for your feedback. Again, just like our services are driven by customer feedback, so are these webinars. So the more information you provide us, either through those polling questions, through the questions that you ask today, or through any feedback that we'll be following up on with some of these as we send out copies of the presentation and the like, we take that to heart, and we want to make sure that everything is valuable for you, since this is for you. So without further ado, we will go ahead and start fielding some of these questions. There are a couple that have been answered in the background. I want to go ahead and bring those up as well in case others are curious. And then we've had several that have come in since that that we'll just cover live. So to start out with, Tree, and I know Gerard also kind of answered this for a customer, kind of a clarification around connecting via RDP. Mm-hmm. So are you, in fact, using the instance DNS string to connect to the RDP?
Yep. So there are a couple of ways. By default, it's the public DNS that gets assigned to the instance. That's exactly what I'm using to connect. That DNS gets obviously translated to an IP address once it reaches AWS. There is a second mechanism where if DNS is not an appropriate mechanism for you, there is a concept of elastic IPs, very similar to what you consider static IPs on-premise. So you can assign an elastic IP address to an EC2 instance, and from that point on, you could actually use that IP address, and it's yours, it's static, it sticks with the EC2 instance, and you can use that IP address to plug into any of your applications that need IP addresses instead of DNS.
Okay. The next one that was also answered kind of in the background, but still an interesting one to keep in mind, do bucket names, so for S3 specifically, only accept lowercase characters?
So bucket names follow the conventions of DNS. If you're familiar with DNS naming conventions, all of those follow lower cases. There are also some restrictions as to use of special characters. So just to also point out that when you define a bucket, and I probably should have pointed this out, but when you create a bucket and you upload objects into that bucket, all of the URLs that get assigned to those objects, part of the URL is actually the name of the bucket. And therefore, it's very important for the bucket naming convention also to comply with DNS rules. So that's why there are certain restrictions enforced on bucket naming conventions. And all of that information is in our documentation as well that we'll be able to and happily share.
Okay. The next question involves the free tier. So traditionally, AWS, again, we offer a free tier for 12 months on certain services, right? There's a listing on our website. The question is more kind of a clarification thing. Does the clock for the free tier start immediately upon creating a AWS account, or can that be delayed for when, you know, hey, now I'm really actually doing it, just to give them a chance to explore the console a little bit?
Right. So the clock starts from the day the account gets created. So we actually look at the account creation date and use 12 months from that date to make sure that you're eligible for free tier services. However, if you have a particular situation where you would like to, you have a workload or something that you want to consider playing with AWS and you really don't want to eat up into your free tier, definitely reach out to us. Use one of the various modes of contacting us, and we'll definitely work with you to make sure that you're getting the right level of support in that regard.
Okay. The next question involves kind of what you mentioned as far as bypassing the payment screen, as far as the credit card.
Yep.
And it's more, how does one do that?
Okay. So if, let's say you're interested in an AWS account and you are planning to use an invoice-based payment method, the couple of ways you could do that. One, you could start with the process that I showed, and as you get to the credit card sign-up payment information screen, you could either stop at that time, and you will, by that time, have established what we call a preliminary account. It's not complete, it's not ready, but at least there's a placeholder already made on your behalf. And along with that placeholder, you get a 12-digit AWS account ID. Take that 12-digit AWS account ID and contact us, and we can work with you to make sure that your payment information is captured and updated correctly in the system. So therefore, you don't have to go through submitting your credit card information. The second way is if you know that you're going to be using an invoice-based method, reach out to us before you even get started, and we can send you a link that's specifically for skipping the credit card payment portion of the screen.
Okay, next it kind of involves, again, how we're deployed globally. Okay, so one thing that's kind of been new, at least in the news, and for us is our new Beijing region. Okay, so they're looking to deploy across the world, specifically in Beijing. Now, there are some special things around deploying anything in Beijing.
Right.
So the question really is, how can you practically deploy a geo-distributed application that involves both U.S. regions and the Beijing region?
Okay, and so I'll probably address it in a different, in a particular way. So all of the U.S. regions, and by the way, this Beijing is not, Beijing is a little different than the rest of our regions. So is GovCloud. So when you have access and you sign up for an account, you have access to all of our regions minus GovCloud and Beijing. If you want to go into GovCloud, you have to sign an addendum, and we provide you access to a different console that's specifically dedicated for GovCloud, different set of credentials. So therefore, you can get into GovCloud and access resources and services within GovCloud. So when you deploy an application, just let's say in US, you could deploy to all of the 3 regions that are non-GovCloud, and then you separately deploy into GovCloud. Very similarly, when you deploy into your regions in US and you want to go into Beijing, those would be 2 separate deployments, and they operate completely in independently.
Okay, and obviously, if you need more information about that, you can always just reach out to us directly, and we can help you guide. We can help guide you through a lot of that. That's why people like Gerard and I are both here as account managers. We can walk you through that kind of thing. We've gone through a lot of the questions that we have here. We probably have time for maybe one more, if anybody has one right off the bat. Otherwise, we'll probably end up closing here for a second. So I'll just sit tight and see if one comes through the wire. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any other additional questions, so we're going to be very timely today. So we'll just kind of close the Q&A session for now, and I'll just leave it to Sri to close up the presentation.
Great. Thank you once again, and hopefully this was useful and helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us, whether it's questions about our services or your applications that you're considering or want to consider moving to AWS, or any questions in general, whether it's a good fit or not. Definitely reach out to us. We're here to help. And as I said earlier, there is an upcoming webinar next week that I highly encourage you to consider attending. One of my colleagues is going to cover that. He's going to go through ease of AWS deployment, and he's going to point through and walk you through how easy it is to deploy common workloads on AWS. So with that, once again, I want to thank you, and hopefully you have a good evening.